Hi, I think that's live, but if anyone could let me know in the comments that you can hear me okay, then that will be great. We've just got one more minute before I start, so I'll wait until then before we kick off. I also apologise if you suddenly hear a lawnmower. Someone has just decided at this very moment just to start that outside. So I apologise in advance if that starts to get a bit loud, but hopefully it'll be okay. Okay, so that is 2 o'clock. So I'm going to start. Okay, yeah. Hi, Nicola. You can hear me. That's good. So hi, everyone. My name's Emily Smith, and I have the fantastic opportunity to come and talk to you today about something that I'm really passionate about, which is invasive species. So I want to say a huge thanks to Lizzie for allowing me to kind of be let loose on her Earth Live lessons and join the fab lineup of other conservationists, wildlife presenters that have talked on here so far about things they really care about. So yeah, huge thanks for that. I would also recommend you go and check them out, obviously, after you've spent the next 20 minutes listening to me, so kind of save that until the end. Right, invasive species. So how did I get interested in them, really? I thought I'd start on that. So I grew up in the rural countryside of Dorset, in southwest England, and I spent a lot of my time kind of growing up as a kid going out pond dipping, chasing after butterflies, building dens, you name it, anything in the outdoors, I would probably give it a go. So that interest and love for the environment made me go off and study geography at university, and it's here that I came across invasive species. And I admit it was something that I'd never really kind of heard of before, but was instantly kind of hooked on them. I just found them fascinating because they can find them kind of anywhere, any ecosystem. So whether it's in the sea, in the ocean, on the beach, in the river, deserts, mountains, forests, you name it, they can be found there and they can have an impact on that habitat. And they also span all different creatures, so plants, animals, little insects. So again, it's that kind of fascination with everything out there and just realizing that these species can impact any element of that. It kind of keeps you on your toes and keeps you interested because you want to work out which ones the new ones might be, where they're coming from, and what we can all do to try and stop that. So that interest kind of grew and grew, and actually led me to go off and do a PhD on invasive species. And then now I work for the Angling Trust, where I'm the environment manager there, and I continue to do work on invasive species, doing it using science to inform policy and help government make decisions on invasive species, but also importantly getting out there and talking to people on the ground about why they should care about the environment, what invasive species are, and what they could do to help. So I have mentioned the word invasive species a lot there, but I haven't actually yet explained what they are. So I thought that was quite an important thing to do. And when I have conversations with people about invasive species, often sometimes they get confused with non-native species. And I can understand completely why, but I thought it'd be important to kind of make that distinction because they're very different. So non-native species are something that has been moved from the environment, their native range. So this could be, example, the Himalayas, could be Africa, Asia, anywhere in the world, but they've been moved from that native area to a new environment by humans, so human activity. So this is very different to example of a natural expansion in their range or due to climate change. And this could be done for a variety of reasons. Some of it could be for crops, for example, your coffee that you might have had this morning at some point, or if you've got an aquarium, some of those species that are kind of swimming around in there, we would class them as non-native species. And actually, they're not really having that much of an issue there, not that much of a problem. They're present there, they might bring benefits to us, and they're absolutely fine. So that is a non-native species. That is different to an invasive species. An invasive species goes through the same procedure, but it ends up having a negative impact. So it can escape into the wild and there it can have substantial impact on the environment, human health, the economy, or all of the above. And that's the ones that I'm kind of interested in. And to kind of simulate how few there are actually when you go through this process, I have a bag of or container full of sweets, and yes, they are mushroom shaped sweets there. But say you had 100 of these present, going through that process, being moved in by humans, actually only one of those at the end would end up being an invasive. So it's a small number. However, the impacts that they have are huge. So in the UK, you estimate about £1.8 billion at least is spent on trying to manage invasive species every year. And it costs the economy in Europe £12 billion every year. So that's a huge cost. And this you might have heard of before, and this can grow through concrete. And I kind of always want to pause and kind of say that again, really, when you're thinking about it, because sometimes you think, hang on a minute, a plant can grow through concrete? No way. And yes, it can. And that is just kind of one demonstration of something that they can do. You get other ones that can kind of clog up pipes. So if you get a whole pipe which is clogged up with mussels all the way through, so there's a huge impact on the economy. And in the UK, we have around 200 of these. So here's some kind of pictures here. So you think 200 of these present in the environment at the moment, and this number is continuing to increase as we are moving around the world, getting more movement of people, more trade going on. So the threat of these new species coming in is growing and growing. And to illustrate their impact a bit more, I thought I would just focus on just three to give you an example. First one being Himalayan balsam. So I've got a little image here of it from my book. So it's this pink one here. And the reason I chose this one is before I was aware or got to know a little bit about invasive species, I probably walked past this plant. It's a lovely pink plant, lovely sweet smelling smell, and hadn't really realised kind of what it was. And you might see it if you're on a train, you might see it kind of going along, following the railway tracks, or actually if you're out on your daily walk, you might spot it along the river. And it's this kind of pink blanket. And the issue with this is the fact that it's very aggressive, as a lot of these invasive species are. They can grow faster, they reproduce more quickly than native species, or they're bigger. And as a result of that, they outcompete the native species present. So you lose the plant diversity present there. But if that wasn't enough, Himalayan balsam, they produce more nectar, so they're more appealing to insects. So as a result of that, not only have they now taken over that environment, it means that you have insects that will come and they will selectively go towards the balsam to take pollen from there. So actually you have plants kind of nearby that are losing out and not having that pollination process. So it's kind of like a double whammy on that side. And if that wasn't enough, when they die back in winter, they expose the soil. So you have this big kind of growth of plants, it's died back, and now there's nothing. So the soil gets exposed. If you get rainfall, that will run off into potentially into the water, which has knock-on consequences for freshwater species such as fish that like to have low amount of sediment in the river, also insects and plants as well. So it just shows how just one species such as that can have knock-on impacts throughout the ecosystem. Another one I wanted to show you was floating pennywort. It's another plant species, and here's kind of a picture of it there. And the reason I kind of wanted to talk about this one is just to illustrate that ability to enter an environment and kind of quickly take it over. So I've got a 5p piece, so tiny thing, tiny small thing that you might have accidentally kind of on your clothing. You might get it on your boot, for example, might not necessarily kind of see it, but from that is enough for a population of this plant to establish a new environment and grow. So from that size, it can grow 20 centimeters a day. a metre every 5 days, and that's just one strand. So you think it will quickly spread and produces these huge dense mats. I actually have a picture here to illustrate it. So this is actually a river that has been just completely choked up with this floating pennywort that sits on the surface, producing this really dense mat. Light can't get through, so it means that any plants that were underneath this kind of die back, and that means you're losing the habitat and the shelter for insects, which means there's less food for fish, and also can result in localized reductions in oxygen levels. And also, again, you have those dense mats, so they can get kind of attached or stuck around bridges, for example, or just slow down water rate, and actually can back up and cause issues for flooding. So there's multiple things there, again, just from one species that they can do and threaten. The final one that I wanted to touch on is Asian hornet. So this is actually one that we don't have in the UK or in the GB, Great Britain mainland at the moment anyway, and I'll come on to that later. But this is a hornet, about this size, that is presenting a huge threat to our native bees. And what the hornet does is it kind of hovers around outside a hive, and then what happens when a bee comes back laden with pollen, it will just snatch it out of midair. And one hornet can take about 50 bees every day. So if you can imagine, they can quickly decimate a whole hive. And the problem with this is because these native species, they haven't evolved with invasive species there, so they haven't built up defense mechanisms against them. So these bees can't do anything to stop it. So they'll just go attack one hive, and then they'll go on and they'll do it to another one. So huge devastating impacts. And obviously you can think about all the other threats and stresses that bees have at the moment from agricultural kind of impacts. So it's something that can be the final last straw for some of our native species. So that was just 3. As I said, there are 200 of these different ones that I could have kind of picked out. But I kind of just wanted to do a kind of brief and overview of just some of the things that could happen. So when I kind of explain to people or talk to them about invasive species, it sounds very much doom and gloom. They come in, they have a negative impact, they spread really fast, they're hard to get rid of. So what can we do? And that's often what happens. And the thing is, there are some really simple things that we can all do every day to stop the risk of these species being spread. And these can be broken up into a 3-pronged approach. Try and say that quickly. So the first one is prevention. And there are some amazing things kind of going around across the world, kind of using nature as it stands to kind of fight back, as well as using innovation in technology. One of these is the use of specially trained dogs that can now sniff out invasive species. So if you have a boat, for example, that's been in one water body and it's got mussels that attach to the bottom, can be going along. Before it's allowed to enter another water, the dog goes around, has a little sniff around, and if an invasive species is present, it is then sent off and it is cleaned before it's allowed to go in there. So I just think that's amazing. Any opportunity to kind of have a dog that you can take to work with you every day, I mean, who wouldn't want that, eh? But in the meantime, whilst we all wait for those to kind of to have, there's something that we can all do. So this is something that you can go out whilst you're on your daily walk, and it's something that actually resonates quite a lot at the moment with the current situation we're in. So this is Check, Clean, Dry. So this is a campaign that has been in the UK since 2000, or launched in 2011, and it copies or builds upon work that's been done in New Zealand, and it's been adopted kind of in America and other places in Europe. And this is just 3 easy steps that we can all do and make sure we do whenever we're out enjoying the environment. So this is whether you're walking, if you're out, if you've been kind of swimming, kayaking, surveying, you name it, anything like that. And so the first one is check. So when you're kind of on your walk and if you've been out, just check, and if you've got any burrs, for example, any seeds, any plant materials, just make sure you take them off and kind of leave them where they are, and that will kind of eliminates any kind of visual things you can see. Just leave it at the water body or at the environment in the car park, for example. The second one is clean. So using my handy props here, the key thing to do is obviously look at the bottom of your boots. So in the tread, for example, you might get mud that might have again seeds, for example, on it, and give it a really good clean down. You have to excuse the kind of state of these here, but give it a really good clean, ideally in hot water, and that will kind of either spray off or remove, or might even kill any kind of these small, thinking back to that 5p, any small plant material, anything that you might come across. And the final one is dry. So ideally leave it in sunlight if you can, and the impact of that is the fact that diseases, so things we can't even see that you might have accidentally picked up, you give that kind of a whack, a final knock on the head, so it means that you're not accidentally going to be taking that from one place to another when you're out enjoying the environment. And this is a really kind of great campaign, and you might actually see it in ports and places around the country, and there's loads of people getting behind it. You've got water companies such as South West Water, working with the South West Lakes Trust, who are doing really great work trying to install these at places so we can all go out and enjoy them whilst we're there. So that is prevention, the first one. The second one is learning to know what some of these things look like so you can report them as soon as possible. So again, there's these handy little ID sheets that you can use that are available. I've included them in the links below. And you have your native species, so you can kind of learn how to, this is the European hornet, what it looks like, and then the Asian hornet there. And once you kind of know what you're looking for, when you're out and about, again, if you're out on your walk, if you see something and you think it might be invasive, just take a photo of it, note your location, and then you go on to iRecord. Again, there's a link below, and just submit that record. And to illustrate just how effective and how important this is, I go back to Asian hornet. As I said earlier, we don't currently have that in mainland Great Britain, and that is because of this reporting system. So it was actually found in 2016, the first sighting. So someone sent off a record of this species, and what happened is they have a kind of unit of experts trained on the species, who were assembled, if you think of Team Assemble, and they were sent out to the location. And what they did is they put out baited areas, so a bit of bacon, bit of sausage, and I put that out there. And what happens is the Asian hornet comes along, finds it, and then what it does is then it kind of goes directly back to wherever it's staying, its nest or its other location. So by placing these around in different locations, they're able to narrow down where the Asian hornet had come from, and actually managed to find it. And it was really high up in this tree. I think they had to use like binoculars to find it. It's amazing stuff. So by having that, there's been 18 cases of Asian hornet in the UK or in GB since 2016, and every single one of them they managed to find and catch. So they've managed to still keep Asian hornet out of the UK. So I don't think you could ask for any better example that shows of how we as individuals can be really valuable at trying to stop these species getting in. And then the other final thing that we can all do is volunteer. So I think if any of you have watched any of the other talks that have gone on, kind of a lot of people will say that they've got into conservation. The way they've got into it or started work in the area is through volunteering, and it's really important, really valuable. There's loads of local action groups that you can get involved with. Again, I've included some links below for some on invasive species, and there's many more out there that you might be able to find yourself. And they also provide loads of educational materials. So SING in particular, the Cornwall Invasive Non-Native Species Group, have done some on for kids. So if you are trying to think of things that you want to do with kids at the moment, have some games, they have some great resources on there on invasive species, native species, and how to tell the difference. So I really, really encourage you just to get out, get involved with a local action group, and it kind of makes it feel like you're giving back to the environment. And through those three things, you can help protect the environment from invasive species. So yes, I think I'll go on to some questions. I think I've got some there. Do you know of any invasive species that have benefited the environment in the long run? So this is a tricky one. This is where you make the distinction between invasive and non-native. So you have typically ones that are invasive species, we class as having a negative impact. So you have many non-native species that are present that have positive benefits on them, but that's when we're talking about invasives, generally they are having this negative impact. So no, not really that I'm aware of. Are there any invasive ladybird species? We had lots of black. Yeah, there's harlequin ladybirds, and actually there's a great person called Helen Roy. You can get involved, and there are ID guides that you can go and find out which all of these different invasive ladybirds are. So I definitely recommend kind of going and having a look at that. Do they know how the Asian hornet entered? So this is where, and I find invasive species fascinating because it is a bit like a detective work sometimes. Sometimes you don't know how they've got in. So some of them, they think it might have been stowaways. So for example, if you've got coming in as shipments within wood, there's one case, I believe it found it in Scotland near a supermarket. So that might have been it being mixed in amongst food produce. But some of these cases, yeah, they can't, you can't work out the original source of it. Particularly, you've got, say, for example, a water body where lots of people are coming and going. It can be hard to pinpoint the source of it. But yeah, that's where they believe Asian hornet came from, was probably as stowaways within trade materials. Is there any other questions from anyone? I don't think so. So it was quite a whistle-stop tour. I hope there were some things in there that you found interesting. What was your favourite project of my PhD? Ooh, so probably my favourite bit was as part of my PhD. So I looked at angling as a pathway for invasive species movement from Europe into the UK. And as part of that, I managed to go to France and spend 6 weeks there, getting the chance to travel around, try and perfect my French. It's still not great. And it surveys some of these freshwater systems to see if there's any invasive species present. So that was really great, but it's also a great chance to talk to the people there as well, the owners, just get their perspective on things. So it really, I really enjoyed that side of things. One, being out in nature, which is, you know, something, as I said earlier, something I enjoy doing, but also having that chance to chat to people and explain to them what I was doing and what the project was about. So I guess that was probably my favourite element, yeah. Right, so I hope that was insightful and was interesting in some way to you. If you have any more questions, then kind of feel free to drop me a message and I'll try and answer them. And thank you so much for tuning in. And obviously, go back and watch some of the other live lessons if you haven't already, and make sure that you watch the other ones that carry on during the series. Thank you very much. Okay, bye.